So I recently watched a video by Romanian TV about good and evil versus complex gray morality, where evil people get power and so on. And I want to posit a third distinct um, genre, so to speak, or a version of a story where the villain is on a path of becoming smaller minded while getting power, and the hero is on a journey of gaining power but also becoming a better person. Um so it has a bit of that black and white morality in a sense, in terms of its judgment of individual situations or actions per se, but it doesn't hide from showing flaws and failures of people and so on. And it can be semi rooted in the personal relationships in a sort of drama sense as well. But it kind of blurs the line on purpose as a third category. The third category is distinct, but the line between good and evil is blurred a little bit in regards to the individual characters and their independent actions and so on as they journey through life until the big fight or climax or something like that. And basically, there's two fictions, and this might be more notable in Eastern, sort of Asian culture in some sense. Actually, no, there's three movies or four movies and three IPs that represent this, which is Drunken Master, The Legend of Drunken Master for the Jackie Chan movies, The Boy and the Beast, and Berserk. These do not show the hero as the uh, best person in the world. Distinctly, they are very ignominious in a large way. They start off very rough and very broken, flawed, not perfect at all, very bad even. But they show a journey of self refinement and character development and growth to the good while also getting stronger in some sense in the usual power dynamics way. And then someone on a journey of self destruction, even if they get more power, they're going to lose in the end because they haven't. There's something about them that's weaker or lesser or evil about them, and so on. And this ties to a certain metaphysics of small man versus great man kind of effect. And this is, and often it kind of correlates to the Carl Jung concept of integration of the shadow, where you give a proper place, like you put it in its place, but you recognize it has a place at somewhere sometimes of your less valued characteristics that are naturally a part of you anyways, right? So it's about putting things in their proper place, kind of like how the Bible says there's a time for peace, a time for war, and so on. Time to cast stones, a time to gather stones together, a time for life, a time for death, all those things. And properly putting them in their place and so on. Um, a vision of integration of the shadow, in one sense, is uh, a modern incarnation of this. It's not very well told, maybe, but at the same time, it's better than some things. It's better that it exists at least a little bit so that people get some understanding of it. Is the Babadook, where the Babadook is not actually like a super. Well, it might be a supernatural entity or something like that, but thematically, it represents masculinity or something. Like the boy is haunted by a very scruffy man figure, and the single mother doesn't know how to deal with it. And ultimately, it comes down to the boy has to acknowledge it. And then the mother can calm down too, basically. So the Babadook blows up because you're repressing masculinity, basically. I mean, that's one interpretation of it. There's other interpretations. I think the homosexual community tried to um, grab onto it and so on. But you can understand why they would grab onto something about coming out of the closet or being yourself properly, not cutting off bits of yourself and so on. And the X-Men story about Pegasus and the Fox um, pre-Marvel X-Men series of movies can be kind of similar in a way. Um, um, what these stories do is they don't tell you the absolute ideal in sterilized fashion. They tell you someone's journey to become the better thing, and it's more of a sort of like a how this might actually be approached to actually do it yourself kind of um, um, more grounded, but still idealistic in a way. Um, Combination that marries the idealism of being the best you can be with the follies and pitfalls of being naive and so on. And the way I can tell from my personal experience, I've been a very like literally from my personal experience, I'm the kind of guy who's tough enough, quite literally, I've done it before, where a pit bull attacks me and I can kick it into submission and like terrify it from attacking me again, basically. I've done that. And at the same time, I'm also, thanks to what I swear is God Almighty coming into my life and making me aware of it, and it's kind of like a complex thing. Maybe it's just schizophrenia. I don't know exactly. Maybe it's God and schizophrenia. Maybe God gave me schizophrenia as like a thing. Uh, so I take him seriously or something. Or something. But a bit of a humbling process, let's put it that way, to be more generous and kind and compassionate and, in a word, nice to people who are needy and less fortunate and so on a lot more often, and not just chasing the highs of like being a tough guy all the time, whether that makes me cruel or intercede on a weakling's behalf because a third person is bullying the second person or something. Like a mismatch. And my experience of this is that it's about integration. And, I grew up literally between two different polar opposite extremes of masculinity. I grew up with a very intellectually outstanding, weak, kind, generous, compassionate, um, academic, university professor, quite literally, traveled the world guy, and the self-made man who's a little narcissistic, quite tyrannical, um, used the psychiatric system to gaslight me while he physically abuses me, single father who stepped up because mother was unworthy and so on. Um, as a man, this is my living situation growing up and so on. So I had a very my father was a very, very strong individual and tough, like genetically gifted with like peak caveman attributes. You know, like the physical attributes and the martial courage and like the toughness and so on, and the raw skills and techniques for like multiple domains of trades and so on. And the adoptive grandparent who never had kids of his own, who was charismatic and wise in how to relate to people on a more better moral foundation. So the dynamic in my situation was between strong and cruel and weak and kind. And both of these had a half value to them. And my experience was very whipping between extremes of what I value and trying to figure out how to combine the two in the best way possible, and failing to multiple times, because I didn't have anyone in my life that had properly molded both parts into strong while dangerous. Or not strong while dangerous, good while dangerous. And my journey has been to actually mold from strong and cruel, flipping back and forth, to weak and kind, and mold into strong, good, kind, dangerous. I'm a very extreme case of this, but I think that's the dynamic that most men find themselves questioning what their situation is supposed to be on some level. I think that's really what it comes down to. I know some people will fall on one side or the other, and so on, but it's about developing your strengths and fleshing out your weaknesses and so on, and recognizing where you stand in society based on that in your uh you know um if you look, like, if you look at my online presence and you've seen some of my earlier Rumble videos, you'll know I've done some pretty horrendous stuff. But like at the same time, like there's things I've done that I've been exactly the right person to fight a bully who is about to like pound the ever living hell out of like a bunch of women and men or something like that. And like none of them were strong enough to deal with it, and I was facing the danger for them basically, and drawing aggro like a tank or something. And then there's moments when I was giving charitably to the homeless and stuff like that constantly and so on. And also on top of it is I've actually deliberately paid in blood, quite literally, for my wrongdoing, so that no one can look at me basically after what I've put myself through and say he hasn't paid enough. I want more revenge. Like I think literally no one I've done anything wrong to, no matter what I've done, at this point, can say I haven't paid voluntarily the blood price to satisfy any desires of revenge for them. And that final bit, uh, that wasn't in me naturally. That's the difference God makes, basically. Um, like that I can go through living hell, put myself through it quite literally, torture myself physically and so on, and survive it, uh, despite all my in the moment thoughts of not going to. But I was destined. I would damn the torpedoes. I'm going full speed ahead on punishing myself for wrongdoing, even if I die, and so on. That's the difference God makes. So basically, that's the price of integration for me personally, because I see the value in strong but cruel and weak but kind. Um, and I wanted to mold myself into that image of strong, dangerous, kind, and good all together, while having a very rough, lopsided upbringing and so on. And that's the genre that is the third genre. Like, it's not saying right is wrong and wrong is right, but it's also not saying you have a perfect hero, or like just one or two flaws and that's it and nothing big or something like that. It's saying there's real consequences for being a bad person, and yet at the same time, someone who starts bad can become a very good person. And it's not saying everyone can do this either. It's saying the hero is the one who starts really rough and builds to a really strong finish. And it shows a reasonably believable but also slightly idealized version of things they might have to do to get to that position. And to be able to do that properly while saying right is right, wrong is wrong, but people are good and bad in mixtures, and some of them are better, some of them are getting better, some of them are worse, some of them are getting worse, is a third genre, if you will, and it's one of those things that it's basically saying never tested, never tried versus being a veteran of life in some sense. And there's a one particular video about this that I find very helpful. Let me see if I can pull it up. Uh, Academy of Ideas on heroism is one thing, but also there's a primarily biblical video by a woman named Alice by the Palm, which says the video title is "Why God Favors Men Full of Desire Though Lack of Character." And basically, what that means is there needs to be, at some level, a virtuous core in order to develop into a proper hero. Um, Something core to them that is aspirational and so on. Even if all their outward layers, aside from the deepest core, are just absolute feces, and the core grows into the outer shell eventually, and so on. And the core is the only thing that's allowed to survive if you're a rough person, to even put it mildly, and everything else has to be burned away basically. Whereas if you have someone who's evil at heart, you can burn away all the exterior layers of seeming virtue and so on, and all that's left is a heart of pure evil. And one of the reasons why this genre is so important is because it tells you the direction of travel, um, and how it looks like in a believable but also noble sense, idealized sense slightly, but also believable on some level, as characters and so on. So it's a bit of a how-to approach things so that you can copy it, more so than just this is an example of who to copy, and this is an example of how life plays out in the dirt and so on. So that's the third genre. It blends the idealization of good heroes with the realism of gray morality and so on. It blends them together, but doesn't violate either one totally. It just puts them in kind of their place in some sense. And That's the journey I've been on personally, so I know it's a real genre that matters, but your presentation of it will make or break the value of such a story in some sense. So yeah, you know, it's 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 I don't know. I don't know. It's just my jam basically. It's what I don't have a perfect past myself, but I've become a much better person than I was before. And I've always had a certain degree of like but my good qualities on some level. Um, Anti-bully, like physical bully, like a crackhead attacking women or children or something, and putting a stop to that, or like a roid rager bullying people on a picnic because he took exception to them looking at him one time, or like giving to the poor and needy out of my own pocket while being poor myself, or something like that. I haven't managed to pull that off because of myself, though. In my case, it was literally God invited me to a process of paying for my wrongdoing, refining my character, showing me the ins and outs of life, both ups and downs, the cruelty of mankind again, after years of hiding away from the world, and yeah, at the same time the compassion of mankind as well, and just which situations according to God or the perfect judge, uh, are what kind of situation and so on, and a little bit of insight into that kind of thing, and that and basically, long story short, the great struggle of humanity is how to be as tough as a caveman while as genteel as like Jesus Christ or Buddha or something like that. Um, it's basically what it comes down to.